Give life your heart, bless everything that's grown. Fear not the loving, all this world's your own. Make rich the soil, but once the seed is sown, seek freedom, don't linger. Go on alone. Walk like a man, even though you walk alone. Why court approval once the road is known? Let come who will, but if they all turn home, the goal still awaits you. Go on alone. Go on alone. Go on alone.
Good morning, everyone. Nice to see you all. Some faces we haven't seen for a while. Hi, Elizabeth. At any rate, I'm Jyotish, and this is my wife, Devi. We are ministers from Ananda Village, and we were down here for many months, a year ago or so, and are very happy to return. So I'm going to read this morning from, this is Rays of the One Light, and it is parallel passages of the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita, showing the similarities between not only the two scriptures, but to the truths east and west and in time and space. So this week, the topic is faith is a call to prayer. Prayer is a call to faith. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, chapter 7 and 21, we read, "Ask, and it shall be given you. Seek, and you shall find. Knock, and it shall be opened unto you. Verily I say unto you, if you have faith and doubt not, if ye shall say unto this mountain, Be thou removed, and be thou cast into the sea, it shall be done. And all things whatsoever ye ask in prayer, believing, ye shall receive." Paramahansa Yogananda showed by his own example that prayer is a power, provided we believe deeply in that power. When our thoughts and feelings are strongly focused and then united in growing awareness to the divine presence within, they can bring even seemingly unrealistic wishes to fulfillment. When Paramahansa Yogananda was in charge of his school in Ranchi, India, he took the boys on occasional outings to the surrounding countryside. There was a waterfall not far away, he told Swami Kriyananda, where I took them sometimes. It was dangerous to cross there, but I would cry out to the boys, "Do you believe in God?" "Yes," they would shout back enthusiastically, and so we always crossed in safety. Years later, after I had gone to America, one of the teachers tried to do the same thing, but he lacked spiritual power. One of the boys slipped on a rock and was drowned. Thus the Master explained, belief alone is not enough. It must be united to one-pointed awareness, which leads to self-realization. In the Bhagavad Gita, in the 6th chapter, it underscores the necessity for such one-pointed concentration. Whenever the mind, fickle and restless, wanders off from its concentration, let the meditating yogi withdraw it resolutely, spurning every distraction, no matter how alluring, and bring it back again and again under the control of the self. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Did it. Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to start by, as we always do, but doing it a little different. This is Whispers from Eternity, which is Yogananda's wonderful book of prayer demands. And since our topic this morning is on prayer and how to pray with faith, I thought I would start first by reading a little bit of Yogananda's instructions about how to use this book and he didn't call them, he said most people pray as beggars. Oh, please, please give me this, help me. And he said, no, we should pray as children of God. And so he called them prayer demands. But we'll talk about what that means as we go on this morning. So this starts off, the topic of this is, I didn't do it right? Okay, thank you. Okay. So Master starts keys to demands, and then in parentheses, please read carefully. So this is spiritualizing a prayer or a demand. Just as a wet match, when struck, does not produce fire, so a mind saturated with restlessness cannot produce the fire of concentration, even when one makes great efforts to strike the cosmic spark. The flame of inspiration is hidden behind the lines of each prayer demand in this book. Since, however, they must be saturated even so with the polluting waters of printer's ink, paper, and the individual's own intellectual associations, it is necessary to rise above all these distractions in order to bring forth the flame of wisdom out of each prayer demand. Different minds reading the same prayer cannot but interpret it differently and also feel it differently. The vast ocean of truth can be measured only according to the capacity of one's cup of intelligence and perception. So will the inspirations behind these prayers and demands be felt according to the depth of one's intuition and feeling. In order to benefit as deeply as possible from the God warmth in any of these prayer demands, take only one paragraph at a time from a single demand. Mentally picture the meaning. Visualize the imagery or the figures of speech, and then meditate deeply on what is perceived until the fiery meaning, free from all word limitation, emerges. O seeker after soul awakening, every day dry with the heat of your concentration the wet matchsticks of mere words in the demand you select, then repeatedly strike them on the tinder of your mind. You will at last see the divine flame leaping out. So let's try it, shall we? I'm going to do a simple one, and I'll read it slowly and try to really concentrate on each sentence, each image, and feel that fire of divine consciousness sparking forth, so that it's with that divine flame that our consciousness is changed. This is, we demand of thee as thy children. Close your eyes and really concentrate on each image. Thou art our Father. We are made in thine image. We are thy children. We neither ask nor pray as beggars, but demand of thee as thy children the gifts of wisdom, salvation, health, happiness, and eternal joy. Whether naughty or good, we are still thy children, all of us. Help us to perceive and understand inwardly thy will for us. Teach us the independent use of our human will, since thou gave it to us to use freely, attuned to thy wisdom-guided will. Okay. Hi, Rosemary. How are you? So, this topic on how to ignite our prayers, how to pray effectively with faith, with power, is a very, very important one. And it's important to understand prayer not as kind of a power, like to be able to manifest things. So much of New Age thought is about how to, visualize a parking space or visualize yourself finishing a marathon or, all these things. And this is okay. It's better to use mental power to accomplish things than not. But understand that's on a much lower order than what real prayer is about. Because if we understand real prayer in the way that Yogananda is trying to help us to understand, it's really a path, a tremendous path and tool for spiritual growth. And so it isn't about what you get, it's about how you do it. And there are, woven in the different readings that we've been sharing this morning, there are three main points that I want to touch on. The first one is concentration. In order to really to be able to focus on what it is we're trying to project out, if our mind is scattered and restless, and if we do it just briefly, it will be ineffective. It's for those of you who have ever tried to light, Master starts with the image of wet matches. If you've ever tried to light a fire with kind of wet wood, and it takes a lot of energy to get it going. But if the wood is nice and dry, and if you have just a good situation, just a little spark, boom, you've got that fire going. And so to have that optimal environment for prayer to be received is to have a concentrated, focused mind. We cannot give away what is not ours to begin with. So, for example, if we have we were watching a movie recently about a man who had a phenomenal ability to work with horses. And it showed these little untrained colts coming into the stable, and they were just, all over the place. But with his concentrated ability to tune into them, within a matter of minutes, he had the harness on them and the saddle on them, but he absolutely, and with no violence, no exerting his will and dominance over them, but it was with a concentrated mind. But then you saw those little colts, and their energy was centered. But if you have a little young horse, a colt that's just wild all over the place, and you say, oh, I'm going to give that to my neighbor, and you kind of bring it over, and it's running around, and it'll just jump over the fence, and how can you give something that you don't have under your control? How can you give your mind in prayer to God if it isn't under your control? If it's just restless and scattered, like in the chapter in Autobiography of a Yogi, Master said when he was a young monk with Sri Yukteswar, he was trying to meditate one day, and Sri Yukteswar called him down, and he he said, well, he didn't respond because he was trying to meditate, and Sri Yukteswar called again, Mukunda, that was his name as a young monk, and Master was kind of indignant and self-righteous and didn't respond again. Finally, Sri Yukteswar said, Mukunda, come down here, and Master called down, I'm trying to meditate, sir. And Sri Yukteswar said, I know how you're trying to meditate, with your mind like leaves in this whirlwind. And that's how most of us are, unfortunately. I mean, I'm sure that was not true of Master, but he was trying to make us feel better, that even he could have a restless meditation. But so we need to understand that prayer is a sacred act. And if we really want to do it effectively, we can't just say, oh gosh, I wish I got this new job or this new car. You have to really say, this is an all-out effort, and I need to prepare my consciousness in such a way that I can do this effectively. So this is the first stage of prayer, is to understand we have to own our mind before we can offer it up. And that takes repeated depth of meditation, the practice of meditation. You know, over the course of my life, I've prayed for many things. Some of them have borne fruit, some of them haven't. But there were 2 or 3 instances that I found very, very interesting, where I wasn't consciously praying for something, but it was like a thought went out. One was Jyotish and I and our son, who was young at the time, we had been moving and traveling in service of Ananda, and then we came back to Ananda village, which is our home base, and we really didn't have a very good place to live. We were living in this very inadequate living space. And then a friend of ours had just completed this lovely little house, just finished building it. And it wasn't like I wanted her house, but there was like a soul call, Master, we've given our lives in service. That house would be perfect for us. Something like that. And she called me 2 days later, and she said, Swami has just asked us to take up the work in Palo Alto. We want you to live in our house. And it was just a momentary thought. It wasn't like something I really was working on and repeated, but I think it was from my heart. And that leads us to the second stage, which is purity of heart. So often we pray for things that are not in our higher interest, if it's based on egoic, if it's mitigated by egoic desires. And another instance, our son was changing schools, and there was a school I really wanted him to be able to get into. And I was praying and praying, let him get into that school, let him get into that school. And he wasn't accepted in that school, and he went to a different school. And yet in the long run, as I looked back, that was perfect, because he would have been very unhappy. That school did not suit him. And I was trying, and this was something I was repeatedly, with my will, with my concentration, but it wasn't with wisdom. It was with egoic motivation. I thought it was good for him. It wasn't for myself necessarily, but there was egoic intervention there. It wasn't pure. And we shared this the other night when we were in Torrance. Another remarkable instance of prayer was about 8 years ago. A forest fire began one very dry summer day, and it was a time where we were having a program at the Expanding Light for first-time visitors, and so there was a large group of people who had never been there before, and this was their first weekend, and here there was a forest fire, and they had to evacuate their cabins and bring all their belongings down to the central village green. And some of our members were trying to fight the fire, but a large group of us gathered in the village green, and we just were praying for several hours. Not for ourselves, but just with purity of intention, we were chanting what we would do, we had a big circle of people, and each one, we'd go around, and they would say a prayer. Lord, protect us from this situation, or Lord, protect the firefighters. And then we would chant Om, and we kept doing that for hours and hours. And the man who was the fire chief for that area, the head of the forestry service from that area, after several hours came down, and he said, I don't know what you people are doing here, but I have never seen a situation like this. The way the winds were blowing, the way where the fire was positioned, we were sure this was going to get away from us, and this was that the whole community would burn down, the retreat center would burn down, that it would just burn, it would get out of control and be a major forest fire in California. And he said, we watched the winds turn back on themselves. We've never, this man said, I've been a forest fighter for 40 years. I've never seen anything like that, where the winds just turned around and blew back. And so they blew the fire back in the direction of the area it had already burned, and it just went out. And he said, I don't know what you people are doing here, but I've never seen anything like it. But it was there was such a purity of intention, calmness, focused energy, not with it was very calm, not with anxiety. A number of people who came that weekend for the first time said that experience changed their life. So was it good karma, bad karma? You think, oh, those poor people, nobody lost anything, fortunately, or no one was injured, fortunately. But they said watching the calmness and the immediate response to demand of God, His power to change the situation. They said that was the most, no class could have taught them that. It was just the experience of watching people living these teachings. And so deep concentration, purity of intention. Make sure what you're praying for is in the highest good, maybe your own highest good, or the highest good of the person you're praying for. There was another example that Swamiji gave, a story that Master, I think it's originally from Master, we heard it from Swamiji, of a young woman in India who was reputed to be very saintly, and through her prayer she healed many, many people of serious illnesses. But her own father was very, very ill, chronically ill, invalid. And the relatives and neighbors said, well, what is it with you? You pray for everyone else and heal them, and you don't pray for your own father? And she was a very pure young girl, and she just said, please don't ask me to do this. Please don't. But they kept pressuring her, and finally she did. And her father was though ill, was very devout, very spiritual, led a very spiritual life. And so finally the pressure was so great on her from the egoic desires, not from wisdom, but egoic desires that, oh, we want him to be well and he should be well. And I'll come back to it. It's not that we shouldn't pray for others, but she understood that it was not the will of God that she pray for her father. That's the important thing. But she let them override her intention, and so she prayed for him. And sure enough, he got well, he was fine. But then when he got his health back, he left his life of devotion and spirituality, and he went back to a very worldly, dissolute life. And so, which was better? And she said, God told me not to pray for the healing of his body. And so that leads us to the third point. In our prayer, concentration, trying to do it purely without self-serving, and then to pray with an inner awareness of God's presence. And when I mentioned that instance where it was surprising to me, because I just said, Lord, that house would be so nice for us. But in retrospect, I realized that I felt God's presence when I offered that prayer, and then it came to be. And recently, a friend of mine was going through a big challenge, and in her work situation. She was very falsely accused of some things, and I felt so bad for her. And I wasn't in a position to do anything about it, but I was just really praying somebody has to step forward and defend her. And I was praying with a great deal of earnestness, concentration, not just for her, but because truth was being abandoned in this situation. And I knew it was wrong. And I knew it was going to hurt the larger work she was involved with. So I just prayed, someone's got to defend her. And I felt actually a great reassuring awareness of God's presence. And sure enough, all these letters started coming, explaining what the situation was. And the truth all came out. And the whole thing was resolved in a beautiful way. But to align your will, not from ego motivation, but from the desire to do good in the world, to help others, to have God's will prevail. If those three things can come together, this is what a prayer demand is. And why it's so important, it's not, that you get the job or you get the house. The fact that we lived in that house, we didn't live in it very long anyway, but it was more that you begin to realize through the practice of proper prayer, a relationship with God, that He's always there, always accessible, always listening, always willing to help you, wanting to help you, and in certain ways knowing what you need before you even need it. Before you even know it yourself, I should say. So if we can understand prayer in this way, we can see how it is a path to God, to deepen our relationship with God, to live in alignment with His will, and if our prayers are answered or if they're not answered, to ultimately surrender and say, you know best. If you want me to have this, I've done my part, but you know best. Not passively, but as a child. If a mother says to a child, no, you can't do that now, and I'm saying this because I know what's best for you, to say with trust, not with a sense of defeat, but with a sense of trust. That God is unfolding the drama of your life in the perfect way, and our job is to align our consciousness with His will in our life, and to put our concentration and our will and our demand and our awareness into the flow of His will in our life. And then, whatever happens, we know that that divine friend and guide is always there, and there's nothing that we need but His love.
I'll also, since we are able to come down so seldomly, I'll say a few words too. There are a couple of things that hold us back from being able to pray effectively. If we think of prayer kind of like energy or electricity flowing through a wire, if electricity flows through a wire, it creates a magnetic field around that wire. And the more powerful the flow, the more powerful the magnetic field. And so one of the things that we want to be sure of in our prayer is that we aren't somehow either sending a weak flow, or more likely we've got a lot of resistance in the wire, and so only a little weak flow gets through and the rest just turns into heat. And so what are some of the resistances, or what impedes the flow of that energy? Well, the first one is what the essential part of the talk is about, the reading, is that we have to pray believing. We have to pray with faith, because if our prayer is to God or Divine Mother or to the universe, or as Devi was saying, sometimes it's often not a formal prayer that we make. It's just a desire that is directed toward God. And if that desire is aligned and able to go from our heart, but we're filled with doubts about God's receptivity to it, or our worthiness to pray, or all of those doubts, or in many, many cases, doubts whether God even exists or not. And so all of those doubts act like resistance in the wire, and nothing gets through. I don't know quite exactly the context, but we were sharing a joke with our friends while we were driving. And the joke is a minister, preacher, arrives in heaven after his death. And he arrives at the pearly gates, which are the gates to heaven. And there's nobody there to greet him. And so he waits around, and he's getting a little huffy about this. You know, I'm a preacher. I had a lot of Sunday services, and I deserve a little bit of respect here. And where is old St. Peter anyway? And nobody, he gets total cold shoulder. And then this scruffy guy comes up, kind of shabbily dressed, and obviously not well shaven, obviously not very educated, and the gates fling open and the angels come out, and St. Peter himself comes out and says, Joe, it's so good to see you. We've been waiting for you to come, and it's just wonderful. We're just happy. Come in. We've got a special place for you. And the minister, he doesn't like this scene very much. He says, well, what is going on here? Here I've been giving all these Sunday sermons and having people pray, and who's this guy anyway? And one of the angels says, oh, this is Joe. He's a New York cab driver. And now the minister's even angrier. Well, think of my position and a cab driver. And the St. Peter looks at the guy and he says, listen, a whole lot more people prayed in the back seat of his car than ever prayed in your church. And so a lot of prayers are just, they aren't formal, they're just spontaneous. We're in need, we have a prayer to God to help us out. A lot of them don't even reach the conscious level. But those kinds of prayers, depending on the strength of the anxiety, or in this case the fear of Joe and his driving, some of those prayers are very powerful, because we don't think to hold back. You know, under extreme circumstances, there have been many instances of a little relatively frail woman going out, and a child is pinned under a car, and she picks up the car so that somebody can pull the child out. And then she puts it back down, and then she's totally unable to pick up that car. But if we don't stop to think that we can't do something, there are a lot of things within our power. So one of the things that holds us back is that we think that we're kind of not worthy or not able, or we don't put enough energy in the prayer. The other thing that holds us back is we don't think that God will respond to our prayer. Maybe God doesn't have the clarity or the capacity or something to understand the wisdom of what we're asking, and therefore He won't respond. But that doubt of God. But both of these, our own worthiness, we have to just forget about it. Think of the image of a little girl riding her bike, and she falls over and skins her elbow and comes running in for, Mommy, pick me up, comfort my elbow, please. But then she thinks, oh, well, I missed 2 questions on my spelling test, so she isn't going to like me. She won't pick me up. Does the mother care? Does God care whether we're perfect? If we call out to him or her for comfort, does he care whether we missed a couple of questions on our life exam or not? He knows we're missing questions all the time. So he doesn't care. But if we, because our own self-doubts, our own sense of unworthiness, our lack of self-esteem, whatever it is, if we think in our mind that, well, God won't respond because I'm not worthy, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because it impedes the energy and the magnetism of our prayer. And so don't worry about your worthiness when you pray. Devi spoke very clearly and well on make sure that your prayer is aligned, especially in praying for other people, but I would say always in praying for yourself. It's much more effective to pray that the will of God be done than that you get a certain result. Because we don't have the wisdom necessarily to know what the right result for us is. We might pray that we want this particular job. Please give us that job, and put a lot of energy. It's better that we pray, Lord, you know that I need employment. Let your will be done. There's a story of Master, and his chief disciple from Mexico was out of work for some time, and wrote Master saying, oh, wonderful news, Master. I've just been offered a very good job in this firm. And just assuming that Master was going to write back and say, oh, wonderful, great, I'm so happy for you. Master sent a telegram, do not under any circumstances accept that job. Stop. And the man was shocked with this response, but because he had faith in Master, he refused the job. It was a job as a CPA, or the chief financial officer for a company. The man who took the job, that company was fraudulent, and 2 weeks later it was arrested, and the man who took the job was blamed by the officers of the company for the faults of the company that had been going on. And so we can focalize our prayers, but it's better to pray for the will of God. There's another kind of St. Peter's joke where St. Peter's taking this man through the heavenly junkyard. And the man looks around and he says, there are wonderful things here. Why is this a junkyard? And St. Peter says, oh, it's things that people didn't want. And the man looks and he says, well, how can that be? There's a Rolls Royce there. That's a beautiful car. And St. Peter said, interesting that you should have asked about that. That's here because you didn't want it. He says, I didn't want it? What do you mean? He said, every time you prayed for a Volkswagen. And so it's better to pray that the will of God be done for us, because God knows our needs. As it says in the Bible, the Father knows the needs of the child before the child ever asks. And so God knows our needs. So, in fact, I pray every day at the end of meditation as clearly and as powerfully as I can, but not for anything specific. I always end my meditation with praying as deeply as I can, Master, help me be in tune with your will completely on all levels, mental, emotional, physical, spiritual, everything. Let me be as completely in tune with your will as possible today. And let me be a channel of thy love. That's basically how I end every meditation. And if we do that, if we really pray that we are in tune with the will of God, then that prayer gets answered, not by manifestations of things, but by inner guidance. And a question will come up, or a decision, or something, and if we're open, God will guide us in the right path. In fact, Master said, one of the two highest prayers is, I will think, I will, I will act. But guide thou my thought, will, and activity to the right path in everything. He called that his highest prayer. The other one was, Lord, give me thyself, that I may give thee to all. Those two, he said, are the highest prayers. So those are the prayers that we should pray, not only for ourselves, but for others. If you have, and it's very, very good to pray for other people. Good for you, good for them, good for everyone. But if you're praying for other people, pray more that the will of God be done. And you can visualize quite clearly if a friend is going through an operation, visualize very clearly the scene with the person being operated on, the doctors, the nurses, the hospital, all of it, filled with light. But don't try to get too specific. Just filled with light, that Divine Mother is guiding that operation, guiding those people, guiding it to the right outcome in everything. And then, as Devi said, and as it says, pray both believing and as God's children. Knowing, if you know in your heart of hearts that God will answer your prayers, then that energy flows unimpeded through that line, and real magnetism is created, and those prayers are answered.
Though green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence I live without fear. Through tempests, through snows, through turbulent tide, the touch of your